Jackson Reynolds stands frozen in the airport terminal, watching his company's stock soar on the digital board as chaos erupts around him. Security guards rush past him toward gate C-17. His phone vibrates with breaking news alerts. The airline's CEO frantically calling him. All because they denied him a seat. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever experienced discrimination while traveling, and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up against injustice. Now, let's see how a routine flight turned into a corporate nightmare. Jackson Reynolds stepped out of the Uber at Atlanta International Airport at 5:45 a.m., adjusting his custom Tom Ford suit as the humid Georgia air hit his face. At 42, the self-made CEO of Phoenix Tech Solutions carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had built something substantial from nothing. His company had become one of the fastest-growing tech firms in America, specializing in cybersecurity solutions that were revolutionizing how corporations protected their data. This morning's early flight to San Francisco wasn't just another business trip. Phoenix Tech was on the verge of acquiring TechVault, a significant competitor with complementary technology. The deal, worth an estimated $780 million, would transform his company from an impressive success story to a genuine market leader. Every detail of this trip needed to go perfectly. Jackson checked his phone one last time before entering the terminal. 3 text messages from Zoe Taylor, his executive assistant of 7 years, confirmed all arrangements were in place. Car will meet you at SFO, 9:15 a.m. Pacific. Conference room booked at Embarcadero Center from 11 a.m. All documents prepared and reviewed by legal. Grant Sullivan confirmed attendance with full board. Hotel suite confirmed. Good luck, boss. He smiled slightly. Zoe's efficiency was one reason for his success. She anticipated problems before they materialized. If only everyone in his life had been so supportive. As he walked through the sliding doors into the air-conditioned terminal, Jackson's mind drifted momentarily to the south side of Chicago where he'd grown up. His mother, Alma, had worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads after his father was incarcerated for a crime he didn't commit. The memory of watching her exhaustion each night as she reviewed his homework, insisting education was his ticket out, still fueled him. The journey from there to here had been unlikely and difficult. A scholarship to MIT. Night shifts at the campus security office while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. The first job at a tech firm where he was consistently mistaken for janitorial staff. The second job where his ideas were stolen by his manager. The decision to start his own company with just $15,000 in savings and a vision that cybersecurity needed to be both stronger and more accessible. 15 years later, Phoenix Tech Solutions employed over 800 people, generated annual revenue exceeding $300 million, and was about to make its biggest move yet. Jackson headed for the premium check-in line at Skyline Airlines. He always flew first class, not for luxury, but functionality. The space allowed him to work efficiently during flights, and the early boarding gave him time to prepare mentally for meetings. Today's 4-hour flight would be crucial for reviewing acquisition details. As he entered the premium line, he noticed the subtle shifts in attention, the quick glances from other travelers in business attire, the slightly too long looks from airline staff. He'd grown accustomed to being the only black face in premium spaces, though it never stopped being tiresome. His thoughts were interrupted by the check-in agent's voice. "Next, please." Jackson approached the counter with his ID and phone ready, the digital boarding pass displayed on the screen. "Good morning," he said, sliding his driver's license and frequent flyer card across the counter. The agent, a woman whose name tag read Heather Wilson, glanced at his documents, then at him, then back at the documents with a slight furrow in her brow. "Good morning, sir. You're flying to San Francisco today?" "That's correct. Flight 1382. She typed something into her computer, her expression shifting subtly. Jackson had seen this look before, the careful neutrality masking suspicion or disbelief. "And you've booked a first-class ticket?" Jackson nodded. Yes, seat 3A. Heather typed more extensively than seemed necessary for a simple check-in. May I see another form of ID, sir? Jackson raised an eyebrow slightly but maintained his composure. In 15 years of frequent business travel, he'd rarely been asked for a second ID. Nevertheless, he pulled out his company credit card, which also had his name embossed on it. Heather examined it closely. I'm sorry, but I'm showing some irregularity with your booking. Let me call my supervisor. Before Jackson could respond, Heather was picking up a phone and speaking quietly. He noticed the white businessman behind him had already been processed and was heading toward security, despite having arrived after Jackson. A minute later, a man in his 50s wearing a supervisor badge approached. Bradley Morris, senior supervisor. Is there an issue here? Heather spoke first. There seems to be a system issue with Mr. Reynolds' first-class booking. Jackson remained calm but firm. There's no issue with my booking. I purchased this ticket 3 weeks ago, and I received confirmation. I'm a platinum member with Skyline and have flown this route in first class several times this year alone. Bradley looked at the screen, then at Jackson's IDs still sitting on the counter. I see. Well, sometimes our system flags unusual bookings for security purposes. Unusual in what way? Jackson asked, though he already knew. Just patterns that don't match typical customer profiles, Bradley replied, avoiding eye contact. I see you're a frequent flyer with us, but perhaps there was an issue with the payment method or booking channel. Jackson removed his platinum frequent flyer card from his wallet and placed it on the counter. I've been a platinum member for 5 years. The ticket was booked directly through your app using my stored company credit card, as always. From the corner of his eye, Jackson noticed a security guard, a stocky man whose name badge read, Keith Patterson, hovering nearby, watching their interaction with obvious interest despite having no apparent reason to be concerned with a check-in issue. I understand, sir, Bradley said, his tone shifting to one Jackson recognized as the difficult customer voice. Let me see what I can do. The first-class cabin seems to be experiencing some technical issues today. We can accommodate you in Economy Plus as a courtesy, and of course, refund the difference in fare. Jackson felt a familiar heat rising in his chest but kept his voice measured. There's nothing on your website or app indicating any issues with first class. I'd like to see exactly what the problem is. Other passengers were now watching the interaction, some with curiosity, others with clear understanding of what was happening. Bradley lowered his voice. Sir, we're trying to accommodate you. Economy Plus has comparable legroom, and, I didn't pay for legroom, Jackson interrupted. I paid for a first-class seat that allows me to work effectively during a flight to an important business meeting. If there's a legitimate issue with the first-class cabin, I'd like documentation of it. Jackson pulled out his phone and called Zoe, putting the call on speaker. Zoe, could you please verify the details of my flight booking to San Francisco today? Of course, Zoe replied promptly. Flight 1382 on Skyline Airlines, departing Atlanta 6:45 a.m., first class seat 3A, confirmation code JR7892. The charge cleared on the company card 3 weeks ago. Is there a problem? The airline is claiming there's some kind of issue with my first class booking, Jackson explained. That's strange, Zoe said. I can see the confirmed booking in the Skyline app right now. Your seat is still showing as reserved. Bradley shifted uncomfortably. Sir, as I explained, there's a technical issue specifically with your booking. We can offer you Economy Plus, or you can take a later flight where we might be able to honor the first-class reservation. Jackson knew exactly what was happening, and also knew that escalating further in this moment would accomplish nothing. Despite the documentation, despite his status, despite the clear discrimination, he was being denied the seat he had paid for. Could you please explain the specific nature of this technical issue? Jackson asked, maintaining direct eye contact with Bradley. His voice remained calm, but the intensity behind his words was unmistakable. Bradley's eyes shifted to his computer screen. It appears there was a payment verification flag on your reservation. A payment verification flag, Jackson repeated. On a ticket purchased 3 weeks ago with a corporate credit card that's been used to book dozens of flights on your airline. Sometimes these things happen, Heather interjected with a thin smile. Our system has certain security protocols. Jackson noticed another first-class passenger, a white man approximately his age in a less expensive suit, check in smoothly at the next counter. No second ID requested, no supervisor called, no payment verification issues. I'd like to speak with someone from your corporate office, Jackson said. Bradley's smile tightened. That won't be necessary. As I said, we can accommodate you in Economy Plus as a courtesy. A courtesy would be providing the service I paid for, Jackson replied. A courtesy would be not making assumptions about whether I belong in first class based on how I look. Bradley's expression hardened. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you not to make unfounded accusations. This is simply a technical issue. Jackson noticed Keith the security guard moving slightly closer, hand resting near his radio as if preparing for a situation. The message was clear, continue challenging them, and things could escalate. He had been here before. As a black man who had ascended to spaces not traditionally occupied by people who looked like him, Jackson had developed a sixth sense for these moments. The choice was always the same, make a scene and risk perpetuating stereotypes about angry black men, or swallow the injustice and move on. May I see my reservation details on your screen? Jackson asked. Bradley hesitated before turning the monitor slightly. Jackson could see his information displayed clearly, including his confirmed first-class seat assignment. There were no warning flags, no payment issues, nothing to indicate any technical problem. As you can see, sir, there's a system notification, Bradley said, pointing to the screen. Jackson looked where Bradley pointed but saw nothing. I don't see any notification. It's an internal code, Bradley replied quickly. Not visible in this view. Jackson pulled out his phone again and held it up. I'm going to record this conversation now, as I believe I'm being discriminated against. Bradley immediately stepped back. Sir, recording is not permitted in the secure area of the airport. This isn't a secure area yet, Jackson countered. We're in the public check-in area. Now, are you refusing to honor my confirmed first-class reservation because of a technical issue that you can't show me evidence of? The security guard moved closer. Is there a problem here? Keith asked, directing his question to Bradley rather than Jackson. No problem, Bradley said quickly. Mr. Reynolds was just deciding whether to accept our offer of Economy Plus seating or to take a later flight. Jackson stood perfectly still, aware that any physical movement on his part could be misinterpreted. He'd seen too many situations where black frustration was twisted into black aggression, creating pretexts for escalation. I'm not deciding anything, Jackson clarified calmly. I'm requesting the service I paid for, and I'm being denied without legitimate explanation. He turned to Keith. Officer, I've purchased a first-class ticket that the airline is refusing to honor. They can't provide any evidence of the technical issue they're claiming exists. Keith looked uncomfortable, caught between automatically siding with the airline staff and recognizing the potential for a situation that could go viral. Sir, I don't have authority over airline seating, Keith said carefully. But I do need to make sure everyone remains calm. I am perfectly calm, Jackson replied. I'm simply requesting what I paid for. More passengers were watching now. Jackson spotted a few people with phones partially raised, though no one was openly recording yet. Bradley lowered his voice. Mr. Reynolds, your options are Economy Plus on this flight or attempting to get first class on a later flight. Those are the only choices available at this time. We need to move the line along. Jackson weighed his options. The acquisition meeting was too important to miss by waiting for a later flight. Making a bigger scene here would likely only result in further delays and possibly being denied boarding altogether. He pulled out his own phone and took photos of his ticket, boarding pass, and the check-in screen showing his seating assignment. He carefully noted the names on the badges of both Bradley and Heather, then stepped back from the counter. "I'll take the Economy Plus seat," he said finally. "But this isn't over. I'll be filing a formal complaint with your corporate office and the Department of Transportation." Bradley nodded stiffly, clearly relieved the confrontation wasn't escalating. "Heather will print your new boarding pass. Gate C-17, boarding begins in 30 minutes. As Heather processed the new boarding pass, Jackson called Zoe again. "Zoe, I need you to document everything about this flight booking. Screenshots of the confirmation, payment receipt, everything. I've been downgraded to Economy Plus without explanation." "Already on it," Zoe replied, the concern evident in her voice. "Do you want me to contact our legal team?" "Not yet," Jackson said. "But stand by. I'll update you once I'm on the plane." He took his new boarding pass without further comment and moved toward security, feeling the eyes of both staff and fellow travelers on his back. Jackson found a quiet corner near his gate and sat down, setting his leather briefcase beside him. His heart rate had increased despite his outward composure. These moments always took a toll, even after all these years. The memories surfaced unbidden. The college campus security stopping him while walking to the library at night, demanding ID when white students passed unquestioned. The luxury car dealership where the salesperson had ignored him until he mentioned his budget. The high-end restaurants where hosts attempted to seat him near the kitchen despite empty tables by the windows. Each time, he'd made the same calculation, which response would preserve his dignity while not derailing his larger goals. Which battles were worth fighting, and which were merely distractions. Today's incident was different. He had built enough success and security to take a stand without the same level of personal risk. And something about the blatant nature of it, the transparent lies about technical issues, ignited a deeper resolve. His phone rang. "Zoe again. I've gathered all the documentation," she said. "Confirmation number, receipt, screenshots of the seat assignment. I also pulled up your travel history with Skyline. You've flown first class with them 17 times in the past year alone." "Thank you," Jackson said. "I need one more thing. Get me the direct number for their executive customer service line." "Already have it," Zoe replied. "And Jackson. I'm sorry this happened. It's not your fault," he said. "But let's make sure it doesn't happen to someone else." After ending the call, Jackson sat for a moment, considering his next move. Making a scene at the gate would accomplish nothing productive. Getting removed from the flight would mean missing the acquisition meeting, potentially costing his company millions and affecting hundreds of employees. Instead, he opened the Notes app on his phone and methodically documented everything that had occurred. Names, times, exact phrases used. He added the photos he'd taken at the check-in counter. Then he opened Twitter. Jackson rarely used social media for personal matters, but his recent profile in Fortune magazine had gained him a substantial following in the business community. His posts typically focused on cybersecurity trends and entrepreneurship advice. Today would be different. He composed a simple, factual tweet: "Today at Skyline Air ATL, denied my confirmed first-class seat despite platinum status and 17 first-class flights this year. Staff claimed technical issues but couldn't show evidence. Downgraded because I didn't match the customer profile." Hashtag flying while black. He attached a photo of his original first-class boarding pass alongside the Economy Plus replacement, careful not to include any personal information. After a moment's hesitation, he pressed tweet and put his phone away. The boarding process began 10 minutes later. Jackson waited until his new group was called, then joined the line. As he handed his boarding pass to the gate agent, a different employee who smiled professionally, he noticed Keith, the security guard, watching from nearby, still monitoring him as if he were a potential threat. On the plane, Jackson stored his briefcase and settled into his economy plus seat. The space was indeed more cramped than first class, making it difficult to open his laptop fully. He would have to adapt his plan to review acquisition documents during the flight. A flight attendant named Melissa Gardner moved through the cabin during pre-flight preparations. When she reached his row, she did a subtle double take, clearly recognizing him. "Mr. Reynolds," she said quietly, "can I get you anything before takeoff?" So they knew exactly who he was. Interesting. "No, thank you," he replied politely. "I'm fine for now." As the remaining passengers boarded, Jackson connected to the airport Wi-Fi one last time and checked his Twitter notification. His post had already been shared over 200 times in just 15 minutes. Several business leaders he knew had commented with their own experiences or expressions of outrage. The plane door closed, and the captain announced they were preparing for departure. Jackson turned his phone to airplane mode, opened his laptop as much as the limited space allowed, and prepared to make the best use of the flight time despite the circumstances. He had made his decision. This wouldn't be just another incident to swallow silently. This time, there would be accountability. 30 minutes after takeoff, the pilot announced that in-flight Wi-Fi was available. Jackson connected immediately, curious whether his post had gained any traction. What he saw made him sit up straighter in his cramped seat. His tweet had exploded. Over 15,000 shares, 47,000 likes, and countless comments. Hashtag Flying While Black was trending nationally. But most significantly, a video had emerged. Another passenger, a marketing executive named Diana Walker according to her profile, had recorded part of his interaction with Bradley and Keith from the check-in line. Her caption read, "Witnessed blatant discrimination at Skyline Air Atlanta this morning. Black executive denied first-class seat with no valid reason while white passengers walked through without issue." The video had been shared by several major news outlets and social media influencers. As Jackson scrolled through the notifications, his phone rang. Aisha Johnson, Phoenix Tech's communications director, was calling. "Jackson, have you seen what's happening?" she asked without preamble. "I'm looking at it now," he replied, keeping his voice low. "I didn't expect this level of response." "It's everywhere," Aisha said. CNBC just mentioned it in their market update. "They identified you as prominent tech CEO Jackson Reynolds. Your original post has been viewed over 1 million times in the last half hour." Jackson glanced around the cabin, suddenly aware of several passengers looking in his direction, some with phones in hand. "There's more," Aisha continued. Skyline Airline stock opened down 1.8% when the market bell rang. It's continuing to drop as the story spreads. This was no longer just about a denied seat. It had become something much bigger. "What do you want me to do?" Aisha asked. "We should probably issue a statement." "No statement yet," Jackson decided. "Let's wait until I land. I don't want this to overshadow the TechVault acquisition." "About that," Aisha said hesitantly. "Grant Sullivan from TechVault just posted his own message condemning Skyline and supporting you. He tagged both company accounts. So the CEO he was meeting with later today was already publicly aligned with him. That could actually strengthen their negotiating position. Keep monitoring the situation," Jackson instructed. "I'll be landing in about 3 hours. We'll formulate a response then." After ending the call, Jackson noticed the flight attendant, Melissa, approaching his seat with an unusual level of attentiveness. "Mr. Reynolds, can I offer you a complimentary beverage?" she asked, her smile slightly strained. "Perhaps some wine or champagne?" Do you agree with how Jackson handled this situation so far? Comment number 1 if you think he responded appropriately by documenting everything and making a simple factual post. Comment number 2 if you think he should have escalated further at the airport. Like this video if you've witnessed or experienced similar discrimination while traveling, and subscribe to our channel for more stories about standing up against injustice. What do you think will happen when the airline realizes the magnitude of their mistake? Let's continue and find out. Just water, thank you, he replied, noticing how her hands trembled slightly as she poured it. Other passengers were now openly watching him. A woman across the aisle leaned over. "Excuse me," she whispered. "Are you the CEO from the video? The one they wouldn't let in first class?" Before Jackson could respond, another passenger 2 rows ahead turned around. "It's definitely him. I follow him on Twitter. That's messed up what they did to you, man." Melissa looked increasingly uncomfortable as more passengers began to recognize him. Some offered supportive comments, while others simply stared or took discreet photos. Jackson maintained his professional demeanor, thanking those who expressed support but focusing primarily on his work. The cabin phone rang, and Melissa answered it. After a brief conversation, she approached Jackson again. "Mr. Reynolds, the captain would like to speak with you when you have a moment." "Is there a problem?" Jackson asked. "No, sir. He just requested a word." Jackson saved his work and followed Melissa to the front of the plane, aware of the eyes following him. The cockpit door was open, and the captain, a gray-haired man in his 50s, nodded as Jackson approached. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm Captain Stephen Miller. I've just received some information from our ground team that I wanted to share with you directly." "What kind of information?" Jackson asked. Captain Miller looked uncomfortable. "It appears there's been a situation regarding your boarding experience in Atlanta. Our regional director has asked me to inform you that we'll be returning to the gate once we land in San Francisco. He'd like to speak with you personally." "I see," Jackson said evenly. "Is that standard procedure when a passenger is wrongfully denied their purchased seat?" The captain winced slightly. "Sir, I'm just relaying the message. For what it's worth, I've been flying with Skyline for 22 years, and I don't condone discriminatory treatment of any passenger." Jackson nodded. "I appreciate that, Captain Miller." As he returned to his seat, Jackson noticed several passengers hurriedly putting phones away, as if they'd been recording the interaction. The cabin had a strange tension now, a mixture of supportive glances and awkward avoidance. He checked his phone again. Skyline Airlines had issued a brief statement. "We are aware of a situation regarding a passenger experience this morning. We take these matters seriously and are investigating. Skyline Airlines is committed to treating all passengers with respect." The responses to this corporate non-apology were scathing. Commenters were pointing out the statement didn't acknowledge what actually happened, didn't apologize, and used passive language to distance the company from responsibility. More concerning for Skyline, their stock had dropped 3% in the hour since market opening. The hashtag boycott Skyline Air was gaining momentum. Several corporate travel managers from major companies had publicly announced they were reviewing their contracts with the airline. Jackson's own company stock, meanwhile, had ticked up slightly, perhaps in solidarity, perhaps in recognition of a leader willing to stand against discrimination. A new email notification appeared on his screen. From Diane Foster, CEO of Skyline Airlines. The subject line, "Personal apology and request to meet." The email was brief but direct. "Mr. Reynolds, I want to personally apologize for your experience this morning. There is no excuse for what happened. I've been fully briefed on the situation and am deeply disturbed by what I've learned. I will be waiting when your flight lands in San Francisco and would appreciate the opportunity to speak with you directly. Regards, Diane Foster, CEO, Skyline Airlines." So the situation had already escalated to the CEO level. Jackson wasn't particularly surprised. The combination of his own business profile, the viral video, and the stock market reaction had created the perfect storm. As he pondered his response, the cabin speakers crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Miller speaking. I need to inform you that we've been directed to return to the gate once we land in San Francisco due to a technical matter that needs attention. This will not affect the safety of our flight, but it may result in a brief delay in deplaning. We apologize for any inconvenience." Jackson almost smiled at the ironic choice of technical matter, the same vague terminology used to justify denying him his seat. Several passengers looked directly at him, making the connection. A middle-aged woman across the aisle leaned toward him. "They're scrambling, aren't they?" "It appears so," Jackson replied quietly. "Good," she said firmly. "I saw what happened at check-in. It was wrong." Jackson nodded his thanks and returned to his work, though concentration was becoming difficult. His phone continued to buzz with notifications as the social media firestorm grew. Major news networks were now covering the story on their business segments, noting the impact on Skyline's stock price and the broader conversation about corporate responsibility. What had begun as a routine flight was becoming a watershed moment, not just for Jackson Reynolds, but possibly for how corporations handled issues of race and discrimination in their customer service practices. The plane touched down in San Francisco right on schedule, but as Captain Miller had announced, they didn't proceed to the regular gate. Instead, they taxied to a more private area of the terminal. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice came over the intercom, "as I mentioned earlier, we've been directed to a different gate. Once we're securely parked, we'll begin the deplaning process. We appreciate your patience." Jackson remained in his seat as the other passengers prepared to deplane, many casting curious or supportive glances his way. Melissa, the flight attendant, approached him. "Mr. Reynolds, the regional director is waiting to speak with you. Would you prefer to meet him on the plane or in the terminal?" "The terminal would be better," Jackson replied. He had no intention of being cornered in the confined space of the aircraft. When the doors finally opened, Jackson was surprised to see a corridor of airline staff creating a pathway through the jet bridge. At the end stood a man in an expensive suit who Jackson assumed must be the regional director. "Mr. Reynolds," the man extended his hand as Jackson approached. "Thomas Warner, regional director for Skyline Airlines Western Division. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me." Jackson shook his hand briefly. "I don't believe I had much choice in the matter." Warner's smile faltered slightly. "Perhaps we could speak somewhere more private. We have a lounge area reserved." Jackson followed Warner through the terminal, noticing the stares from other travelers who recognized him from the now viral video. Several airport employees were also watching with interest. When they reached a private lounge area, Jackson was surprised to find it empty except for them. "Mr. Reynolds," Warner began once they were seated, "first, let me express my deepest apologies for what happened in Atlanta this morning. It was completely unacceptable and doesn't reflect Skyline's values." Jackson said nothing, waiting. Warner continued, clearly uncomfortable with the silence. "We'd like to make this right. Immediately. First, we're offering you an upgrade to first class for your return flight, plus complimentary first-class tickets for your next 10 flights with Skyline." "I'm not interested in free tickets," Jackson replied evenly. "Of course," Warner nodded quickly. "We understand this goes beyond compensation. The employees involved have been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation." "That's reactive, not proactive," Jackson observed. "What are you doing to ensure this doesn't happen to someone else?" Warner shifted in his seat. "We take these matters very seriously. Our company has a strict non-discrimination policy." "Policies are meaningless without implementation and accountability," Jackson interrupted. "The fact that your staff felt comfortable doing this suggests the problem runs deeper than a few individuals." Warner's professional veneer cracked slightly. "Mr. Reynolds, we're trying to resolve this situation amicably. Our CEO, Diane Foster, is actually on her way here to speak with you personally. That's how seriously we're taking this." "I received her email," Jackson acknowledged. "I'll wait to speak with her." Warner looked relieved. "Thank you. She should be here within the hour. In the meantime, is there anything we can provide? A meal, perhaps?" No, thank you. I'd just like some privacy to prepare for my business meeting. Of course, Warner stood. I'll leave you alone. Please don't hesitate to ask if you need anything. As Warner left, Jackson checked his phone. The situation had continued to escalate in the business world. Skyline's stock had dropped 5% and was still falling. Several major corporate clients had publicly announced they were reviewing their travel contracts with the airline. The hashtag boycott Skyline Air was the #1 trending topic nationally. More personally concerning, the media had fully identified him now. Major business publications were running his photo alongside headlines about the incident. His inbox was flooded with interview requests from news outlets. His phone rang. Zoe again. Your TechVault contacts just called, she said. They saw everything and want you to know they're waiting in the terminal to meet you as a show of support. This was unexpected. Grant Sullivan is here. At the airport? Yes, with 2 of his board members. They want to escort you to the meeting themselves. They're making a statement by doing so. Jackson considered this development. The acquisition negotiations could actually benefit from this situation if TechVault was publicly aligning with him. Tell them I appreciate it, but I'm waiting to speak with the Skyline CEO first. I should be free in about an hour. Will do. And Jackson? Phoenix Tech stock is up 3 points since the market opened. Investors seem to appreciate a CEO who stands up for himself. After ending the call, Jackson sat back and closed his eyes for a moment. This was not how he had envisioned this day unfolding. The door opened, and a woman in her late 50s entered. Her tailored suit and confident bearing marked her as an executive even before she spoke. Mr. Reynolds. I'm Diane Foster, CEO of Skyline Airlines. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Jackson stood and shook her hand. Ms. Foster. Please, call me Diane, she said, taking a seat across from him. I want to personally apologize for what happened this morning. There is absolutely no excuse for how you were treated. I appreciate that, Jackson said. But I'm more interested in what happens next. Foster nodded. Understandable. The employees directly involved have been suspended pending investigation. We'll be implementing additional training. That's not enough, Jackson interrupted. This isn't about a few bad apples. Your check-in agent called a supervisor, who backed her up. A security guard was positioned nearby as if I were a threat. That suggests a systemic issue, not isolated incidents. Foster's expression tightened slightly. Mr. Reynolds, I assure you Skyline Airlines does not have systemic discrimination issues. This was an unfortunate isolated incident. Jackson reached into his briefcase and removed a folder. During the flight, my team compiled some interesting data. He slid the folder across the table. These are publicly available complaints filed against Skyline over the past 3 years, specifically regarding racial discrimination. There are 73 documented cases. Foster stared at the folder without opening it. That doesn't strike me as isolated, Jackson continued. And those are just the incidents where someone took the time to file a formal complaint. I wasn't aware of this number, Foster admitted, finally opening the folder. That's concerning, given your position, Jackson noted. But it suggests the problem may be more structural than you realize. Foster flipped through the pages, her expression growing more troubled. I'll need to review these thoroughly. Of course. You should also know that my experience this morning is now being covered by major news outlets, and your company's stock has dropped significantly as a result. Foster closed the folder. Yes, I'm aware of the financial impact. That's part of why I'm here. We'd like to offer a settlement. I'm not interested in money, Jackson cut her off. What I want is meaningful change. What exactly are you proposing? Jackson leaned forward. First, a comprehensive overhaul of your training procedures, developed and implemented by experts in unconscious bias. Second, a clear accountability structure for discrimination complaints. Third, the creation of a Chief Diversity Officer position reporting directly to you, with actual authority to make changes. Fourth, transparent metrics on customer experience broken down by demographic data, published quarterly. Foster looked stunned. That's extensive. So is the problem, Jackson replied simply. Mr. Reynolds, while I appreciate your suggestions, I can't commit to organizational changes of that magnitude on the spot. There are board approvals, budget considerations. I understand corporate governance, Jackson interrupted. I run a substantial company myself. But I also understand that sometimes it takes a crisis to drive meaningful change. His phone buzzed with a text from Zoe, Grant Sullivan and TechVault board still waiting. Meeting time getting tight. Jackson stood. I have a business meeting to attend. You have my terms for resolving this situation. I'll expect your response by tomorrow morning. Foster also rose. And if we can't meet all of those demands? Then I'll pursue other avenues, Jackson said evenly. Including legal ones. The documentation is quite compelling. Foster's expression hardened. I hope we can reach a reasonable resolution. So do I, Jackson replied. Reasonable would be ensuring no one else experiences what I did today. As he turned to leave, Foster called after him. Mr. Reynolds, your acquisition meeting with TechVault, we know about it. Don't let our situation interfere with your business opportunities. Jackson paused. That sounds almost like a threat, Ms. Foster. Not at all, she backtracked quickly. I merely meant we don't want to delay you further. I appreciate the concern, Jackson said coolly. But TechVault's CEO is actually waiting for me in the terminal. As it turns out, companies that value equality make better business partners. He left Foster standing there, her carefully constructed corporate persona finally showing cracks of genuine concern. The moment Jackson stepped into the main terminal, he spotted Grant Sullivan and two TechVault board members waiting. What he hadn't expected was the small crowd of journalists and onlookers with phones raised, capturing the moment. Jackson. Grant called out, approaching with hand extended. The 50-something CEO of TechVault wore a casual Silicon Valley uniform of expensive jeans and a blazer. Quite a morning you've had. They shook hands as cameras flashed. The symbolic importance of the moment wasn't lost on Jackson, two CEOs, one black and one white, demonstrating public solidarity in the face of discrimination. I appreciate you coming to meet me, Jackson said. Least we could do, Grant replied. What happened was inexcusable. We wanted to show support not just privately but publicly. The TechVault board members, Sophia Rivera and Martin Chen, also stepped forward to shake Jackson's hand. We still have a business meeting to conduct, Grant continued, but first, there are some reporters hoping for a statement. Entirely your call if you want to speak with them. Jackson surveyed the gathered media. This wasn't his preferred way of handling the situation, but sometimes leadership meant stepping into uncomfortable moments. A brief statement, he decided. The journalists surged forward as Jackson approached. Microphones extended toward him as questions overlapped. Mr. Reynolds, can you describe what happened? Will you be filing a lawsuit against? Has the airline offered? Jackson raised a hand, and the question subsided. This morning, I was denied a first-class seat I had purchased on Skyline Airlines despite being a platinum member who has flown first class with them 17 times in the past year alone. The stated reason was a technical issue that staff couldn't or wouldn't explain. I was the only passenger experiencing this issue, and also the only black passenger in the first-class line. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. What happened to me today happens to people of color across America every day, often without the platform or resources I have to address it. This isn't about one airline or one incident. It's about a broader pattern where certain people are automatically deemed suspicious or not belonging in premium spaces. What do you want from the airline? a reporter called out. I've requested systemic changes to prevent this from happening to others, including comprehensive anti-bias training, accountability structures, executive-level diversity leadership, and transparent metrics. I don't want compensation. I want transformation. And if they refuse, another journalist asked. Then the public and their customers will draw their own conclusions about the company's values. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a business meeting to attend. Grant Sullivan stepped forward. And as CEO of TechVault, I want to add that we fully support Mr. Reynolds. Companies today must stand against discrimination in all forms. How businesses respond to these incidents reveals their true character. With that, security personnel created a path for Jackson and the TechVault executives to exit the terminal. They climbed into a waiting SUV that would take them to their meeting location. That was well handled, Sofia Rivera commented once they were inside the vehicle. Direct but dignified. I'm just sorry you had to deal with this today of all days, Grant added. Our acquisition discussions shouldn't be overshadowed by Skyline's failings. On the contrary, Jackson replied, this situation has clarified some things for me about corporate culture and values. Which is relevant to our discussions. Martin Chin nodded. Combining companies means combining cultures. How leadership responds to challenges says a lot about that culture. The conversation shifted to more general topics as they drove toward downtown San Francisco, but Jackson could sense a subtle change in the dynamic. The TechVault team seemed to regard him with increased respect, not just as a business equal, but as someone who had handled a difficult public situation with grace. When they arrived at the Embarcadero Center, Jackson was surprised to find Diane Foster waiting in the lobby. Mr. Reynolds, she called out as he entered with the TechVault executives. May I have one more moment of your time? Grant Sullivan looked to Jackson. We can head upstairs. Join us when you're ready. After they departed, Jackson approached Foster. I thought we'd concluded our conversation at the airport. I've been doing some thinking, Foster said, her tone different from earlier, less corporate, more genuine. And making some calls. You're right about the pattern of complaints. I should have been more aware. Jackson waited, sensing there was more. I've spoken with several board members, she continued. We're prepared to implement the changes you suggested. All of them. We'll need some time to structure the details, but I have their support for the direction. What changed your mind so quickly? Jackson asked. Foster's professional facade slipped further. Honestly? Partly it's the business impact. Our stock is down 8% and falling. Major corporate clients are contacting us with concerns. But it's also. I watched the video of what happened to you. It was indefensible. And when I saw our compiled complaint data. She shook her head. We have a real problem, and I've been missing it. I appreciate the candor, Jackson said. And the commitment to change. I'll want to see the detailed implementation plan. You'll have it by tomorrow, Foster promised. We'll also be issuing a public apology, a real one, not corporate speak, and announcing the changes. Would you be willing to provide input on our approach? Jackson considered this. Yes, but only if the changes are substantive, not cosmetic. They will be, Foster assured him. And I know your acquisition meeting is important. I want to make clear that Skyline has no intention of interfering with your business in any way. I didn't think you would, Jackson replied. That would compound the legal issues considerably. Foster nodded. I'll have my team contact yours with the implementation details. And Mr. Reynolds? For what it's worth, I am truly sorry this happened. For the first time, Jackson felt she meant it. Actions will speak louder than words, Ms. Foster. I look forward to seeing the changes. As Foster left, Jackson headed to the elevator, his mind already shifting to the acquisition meeting ahead. What had begun as a routine business trip had evolved into something much more significant, not just for him personally, but potentially for countless future travelers who might be spared similar experiences. When he reached the conference room, Grant Sullivan and his team were waiting. Grant approached him privately before they began. "Everything okay with Skyline?" "Getting there," Jackson replied. "They've agreed to implement the changes I requested." Grant nodded appreciatively. "Good. Now, shall we get down to business? I believe we have an acquisition to discuss." Jackson smiled for the first time that day. "Yes, we do." The conference room on the 32nd floor offered a spectacular view of San Francisco Bay, but no one was admiring the scenery. All attention was focused on Jackson Reynolds and Grant Sullivan as they prepared to finalize the details of a deal that would reshape the cybersecurity landscape. "Before we dive into the numbers," Grant began, "I want to acknowledge that today has been unusual. If you'd prefer to reschedule." "That won't be necessary," Jackson replied, opening his briefcase. "I've learned to compartmentalize over the years." Grant nodded with understanding. "In that case, let's proceed. But first, I want to share something." He glanced at his board members, who nodded in agreement. "What happened to you this morning has caused us to reflect on our own company practices. Martin has suggested we should conduct an audit of our internal diversity and inclusion efforts as part of this merger." Martin Chen leaned forward. "If our companies are combining, we want to ensure the resulting culture is one where incidents like you experienced today are unthinkable." This was unexpected. Jackson had been prepared for standard acquisition discussions, valuations, integration timelines, retention packages. Instead, the Tech Vault team was leading with corporate culture. "I appreciate that," Jackson said. "Phoenix Tech has worked hard to build an inclusive environment. It's one of our strengths." "We've noticed," Sofia Rivera added. "Your employee retention rates are impressive, especially among women and people of color in technical roles. We'd like to understand how you've achieved that." For the next 30 minutes, the discussion focused on corporate culture rather than financials, a significant departure from typical acquisition talks. Jackson outlined Phoenix Tech's mentorship programs, recruitment strategies, and accountability metrics. The Tech Vault team took notes and asked thoughtful questions. "This is exactly why we wanted to acquire Phoenix Tech rather than just licensing your technology," Grant finally said. "Your company has solved problems we're still struggling with." Speaking of the technology, Jackson transitioned, "Shall we discuss the integration roadmap?" As they moved into the technical details, Jackson noticed a subtle shift in dynamics. The Tech Vault team seemed to defer to his expertise more readily than might have been expected in an acquisition where they were the purchasing company. 3 hours later, as they reviewed the proposed terms, Jackson realized something else had changed. Several key points had been modified in Phoenix Tech's favor since their last discussion. "These earnout terms are more generous than what we discussed last week," Jackson noted, reviewing the document. Grant exchanged glances with his CFO. "We've reevaluated based on recent performance indicators. Your company's value proposition has clarified." Jackson understood the subtext. His handling of the Skyline incident had increased his perceived value as a leader. What might have been seen as merely acquiring technology was now viewed as bringing aboard a CEO with proven crisis management skills and public credibility. His phone buzzed with a news alert: Skyline Airline stock down 8% following viral discrimination incident. Grant noticed. "Your former seatmates are having a rough day in the market." "They're working on making necessary changes," Jackson replied diplomatically. "Good," Grant said. "Now, about the leadership structure post-acquisition." The original plan had been for Jackson to become a division president reporting to Grant. But the new proposal outlined a co-CEO arrangement for a 2-year transition period, with Jackson eventually becoming CEO when Grant moved to executive chairman. "This is different from our previous discussions," Jackson observed. "Today made something clear to our board," Grant explained. "Your leadership style and public presence are significant assets. The business world is changing, companies need leaders who can navigate complex social issues while delivering financial results. You've demonstrated both. By late afternoon, they had reached agreement on all major points. The acquisition would value Phoenix Tech at $920 million, significantly higher than the $780 million initially discussed. Jackson would become co-CEO immediately, transitioning to sole CEO within 24 months. As they prepared to announce the deal to their respective teams, Martin Chen pulled Jackson aside. That situation with Skyline this morning, most executives would have kept it private or settled quietly. The way you handled it, insisting on systemic change rather than personal compensation, it told us a lot about your character. I appreciate that, Jackson replied. But to be honest, I was just doing what seemed right. That's exactly my point, Martin said. Leadership isn't about doing what's calculated, it's about doing what's right, even when it's difficult. We're getting more than technology in this acquisition. We're getting the kind of leadership that's increasingly rare. As they rejoined the others for the formal announcement, Jackson's phone buzzed again. A statement from Skyline Airlines had just been released. Skyline Airlines acknowledges and deeply regrets the discriminatory treatment experienced by Phoenix Tech CEO Jackson Reynolds on one of our flights today. We have begun implementing comprehensive changes to ensure such incidents never recur, including mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, the creation of a Chief Diversity Officer position reporting directly to the CEO, new accountability structures for discrimination complaints, and transparent quarterly reporting on customer experience metrics across demographics. The employees involved have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. We are committed to earning back the trust of all our passengers. Jackson showed the statement to Grant, who read it and nodded approvingly. Looks like you've already changed one company today. Ready to help transform another? Jackson smiled. Let's make it official. They walked to the podium where a small gathering of executives from both companies waited. Grant spoke first, announcing the acquisition in broad terms. Then he introduced Jackson. Today has been eventful, Jackson began, drawing knowing smiles from those who had followed the news. But I'm pleased to stand here and announce that Phoenix Tech is joining forces with TechVault to create the most comprehensive cybersecurity platform in the industry. As he outlined the strategic vision for the combined companies, Jackson noticed several attendees checking their phones, likely seeing updates about the Skyline situation. But for the first time since that morning, the focus was primarily on the business at hand rather than the discrimination he had faced. That, perhaps, was the most significant victory of all. Jackson sat alone in his hotel suite that evening, finally allowing himself to process the full emotional weight of the day. The adrenaline that had carried him through confrontations and negotiations was fading, leaving room for the familiar exhaustion that followed these incidents. He called the one person who would truly understand. Mom. It's me. Jackson, Alma Reynolds' voice carried the warmth and strength that had guided him through his most difficult moments. I saw the news. Are you all right? I'm fine, he assured her. Just tired. I imagine so. Fighting these battles takes something out of you, even when you win. At 72, Alma had lived through the civil rights era, raising Jackson alone in South Chicago while working multiple jobs. She had taught him how to navigate a world that often saw his skin before his character, how to maintain dignity without compromising ambition. The company acquisition went through, Jackson told her. Better terms than we expected. That's wonderful news, Alma said. Though I'm not surprised. You've built something remarkable, Jackson. I had a good teacher, he replied. Someone who showed me how to turn obstacles into opportunities. You did the right thing today, she said after a moment of silence. Standing your ground, demanding real change instead of hush money. That's how progress happens, not all at once, but one principled stand at a time. I know, Jackson sighed. But sometimes I just wish I could board a plane without it becoming a test of character. I understand that feeling, Alma said softly. Your father used to say the same thing. He would be so proud of you, Jackson. Not just for your success, but for how you've achieved it. After finishing the call with his mother, Jackson noticed several messages waiting. One was from Kenneth Williams, his attorney. Call me when you can. We should discuss options regarding Skyline. Jackson dialed immediately. Kenneth, thanks for getting back to me so quickly. Of course, the attorney replied. I've reviewed everything your team sent over. The evidence is compelling, the video, the documentation of your previous flights, the pattern of complaints against the airline. If you want to pursue legal action, we have a strong case. What would that look like? Jackson asked. We could file a discrimination lawsuit seeking damages. Given your profile and the public nature of the incident, Skyline would almost certainly settle rather than risk a trial. The settlement would likely be substantial. Jackson considered this. And if money isn't my primary objective? Then we leverage the threat of legal action to secure binding commitments to institutional changes, Kenneth explained. The approach you've already begun with the CEO. That's what I want, Jackson confirmed. Enforceable, measurable changes. Not just promises. We can draft an agreement with specific benchmarks and reporting requirements, Kenneth suggested. With the media attention and stock impact, Skyline is motivated to resolve this quickly. Draft the agreement, Jackson instructed. Focus on the changes we discussed with Foster, but add independent verification mechanisms. I want regular audits by a third party, not just internal reporting. After finishing with Kenneth, Jackson received another call, this one from Diane Foster herself. Mr. Reynolds, I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all, Jackson replied. I was actually just discussing next steps with my attorney. There was a brief pause. I see. I'm calling because our board held an emergency meeting this afternoon. They've authorized me to implement all the changes we discussed, effective immediately. That's good to hear. There's more, Foster continued. One board member, Gerald Thompson, suggested that we were overreacting to a PR problem. He characterized your experience as a misunderstanding rather than discrimination. Jackson wasn't surprised. There was always someone who refused to see the obvious. The other board members strongly disagreed, Foster continued. Two of them have family members who've experienced similar treatment. Thompson has been asked to resign, and he has agreed to do so. This was unexpected. That's a significant step. It's a necessary one, Foster replied. We can't change our culture with deniers in leadership positions. She paused again. Our stock closed down 8% today. Several major corporate clients have contacted us about reviewing their travel contracts. That's unfortunate, Jackson said, though he wasn't particularly sympathetic to the financial consequences of their actions. It's deserved, Foster admitted, surprising him again. But we're committed to earning back trust. I've drafted an action plan based on your suggestions and would appreciate your feedback before we announce it publicly. Would you be willing to review it? Yes, Jackson agreed. Send it over, and I'll have comments back to you by morning. Thank you, Foster said. And Mr. Reynolds? For what it's worth, I believe this incident, painful as it was, will ultimately make Skyline a better company. After the call ended, Jackson opened his laptop to find Foster's email already waiting. The plan was more comprehensive than he had expected, detailed training protocols, clear accountability structures, a proposed timeline for implementing the Chief Diversity Officer position, and specific metrics for measuring progress. As he reviewed the document, another email arrived, this one from a competing airline CEO, expressing solidarity and highlighting their own diversity initiatives. Then another, and another. Airlines across the industry were suddenly eager to showcase their commitment to equal treatment. Jackson's phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Phoenix Tech stock closed up 3.4% today. Investors like companies with principled leadership. It was a small validation that doing the right thing could also be good business. Jackson made notes on Foster's proposal, suggesting stronger enforcement mechanisms and more transparent reporting. Then he drafted a brief statement of his own to release once the agreement was finalized. As he worked, he realized that today's incident, painful and unnecessary as it was, had created an opportunity for impact beyond what he could have achieved otherwise. His platform had suddenly expanded, and with it, his ability to influence corporate behavior. By midnight, he had finalized his response to Foster, arranged a follow-up call with his legal team, and prepared talking points for the press conference announcing the TechVault acquisition tomorrow. It had been one of the longest days of his professional life, but potentially one of the most consequential. Before turning in, he checked social media one last time. The hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack had evolved into a broader conversation about discrimination in customer service across industries. People were sharing their own experiences, and companies were being forced to respond. One story had sparked thousands. That was how change happened, not all at once, but one incident, one stand, one voice at a time. 6 months later, Jackson Reynolds walked confidently through Atlanta International Airport, headed for a Skyline Airlines flight to Chicago. He was traveling to visit his mother, a trip he made monthly despite his increasingly demanding schedule as co-CEO of the newly merged Phoenix TechVault. The changes at the airport were subtle but noticeable. New signage highlighted customer rights and reporting procedures for discrimination. Staff wore small pins indicating they had completed enhanced service training. As Jackson approached the premium check-in counter, he recognized none of the faces from his previous encounter. The young woman at the counter smiled professionally as she checked his ID. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds. Thank you for flying Skyline today. We have you in first class, seat 3A. Would you like a digital or printed boarding pass?" "Digital is fine, thank you," Jackson replied, watching as she processed his information efficiently and without hesitation. "You're all set," she said, returning his ID. "The premium security lane is to your right, and the Skyline Lounge is available for your use before boarding. Flight 218 begins boarding at Gate B22 in approximately 1 hour. Simple, professional, and exactly the same service offered to every first-class passenger. As it should be." In the lounge, Jackson settled into a comfortable chair with his laptop. He had a video call scheduled with Grant Sullivan to discuss their upcoming quarterly earnings report, the first to fully reflect the merged company's performance. As he waited for the call to connect, a flight attendant approached. Her name badge read, Melissa Gardner, the same attendant from that fateful flight 6 months ago. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, recognition in her eyes. "It's good to see you flying with us again." "Thank you," Jackson replied, wondering if this was merely a courtesy check-in. Melissa hesitated, then added, "I wanted to thank you, actually. The changes you pushed for, they've made a real difference for us." Jackson looked up with interest. "How so?" "The training we received was eye-opening," she explained. "Many of us didn't realize how certain behaviors might be perceived. And the new protocols have actually made our jobs easier, clearer guidelines, better support systems." She smiled slightly. "Plus, employee satisfaction scores are up across the board. Turns out, most people want to do the right thing, they just need the right tools and expectations." "I'm glad to hear that," Jackson said sincerely. After Melissa departed, his video call connected. Grant's face appeared on screen, the San Francisco skyline visible through the window behind him. "Jackson. How's Atlanta treating you this time?" "Much better," Jackson replied with a small smile. "How are things on your end?" "The final integration numbers look excellent," Grant reported. "We're projecting to exceed our merger synergy targets by 14%. The market is responding accordingly." They spent 20 minutes reviewing the quarterly presentation, making final adjustments to key messages for investors. As they wrapped up, Grant mentioned, by the way, did you see the industry news this morning? Not yet. What happened? Skyline's new chief diversity officer, that civil rights attorney they hired on your recommendation, has formed an industry coalition to standardize anti-discrimination training and reporting across all major airlines. 7 carriers have already signed on. Jackson hadn't heard this development. That's significant progress. It started with one person refusing to accept discrimination, Grant observed. Sometimes that's all it takes. After ending the call, Jackson scrolled through his news alerts. Among the business headlines was an update on the staff involved in his incident. Bradley Morris and Heather Wilson, after completing extensive retraining, had been reassigned to help develop and deliver the new customer service protocols. Keith Patterson, the security guard who had hovered menacingly, was now leading security staff training on avoiding racial profiling. Another article analyzed Skyline's stock performance. After the initial 8% drop following Jackson's incident, the shares had recovered and were now trading 4% higher than before, outperforming the industry average. Analysts attributed this to improved customer satisfaction metrics and positive press around their diversity initiatives. The gate agent announced boarding for his flight to Chicago. As Jackson gathered his belongings, he received a text from Zoe. Young Entrepreneurs Association asked if you'd consider mentoring another cohort this fall. 20 students, all from underrepresented backgrounds in tech. Despite his packed schedule, Jackson replied immediately, absolutely. Set it up. On the plane, the first-class flight attendant welcomed him by name and offered a pre-flight beverage. As Jackson settled into his seat, he noticed the passenger beside him, a young black man in his 20s, looking slightly uncomfortable in the premium cabin, as if expecting to be challenged. First time in first class? Jackson asked conversationally. The young man nodded. Yeah. Just got promoted at my tech startup. Still getting used to the perks. Congratulations, Jackson said. I'm Jackson Reynolds. Recognition dawned in the young man's eyes. Wait, Phoenix Tech Jackson Reynolds. The one who stood up to Skyline Airlines. Jackson nodded. Man, that was inspiring, the young man said, introducing himself as Darius. I followed that whole situation. You could have just taken a settlement and moved on, but you pushed for real change. It seemed like the right thing to do, Jackson replied simply. It made a difference, Darius insisted. My company actually switched to Skyline for corporate travel because of the changes they implemented afterward. My boss said she wanted to support companies that respond to criticism by improving, not just damage control. They chatted throughout the flight, Jackson offering advice about navigating the tech industry as a young black professional. As they began their descent into Chicago, Darius asked a question that caught Jackson off guard. How do you decide which battles to fight? There are so many instances of subtle discrimination, microaggressions. You can't challenge everyone without exhausting yourself. Jackson thought about his mother's words from all those months ago. Someone very wise once told me that sometimes the highest form of success isn't just achieving your own goals, it's making the path wider for those who follow. I choose battles where I can create systemic change, not just personal vindication. As the plane touched down in Chicago, Jackson gazed out the window, seeing his reflection superimposed over the open sky beyond. The journey from the south side to the boardroom had been long and filled with obstacles. But each challenge had strengthened his resolve to create not just personal success, but meaningful change. The acquisition deal that had brought him to San Francisco that fateful day had transformed Phoenix Tech. But the incident that had preceded it had potentially transformed an entire industry. One-seat denial had sparked a movement that was now affecting thousands of travelers daily. Sometimes the most significant transformations began with a single moment of standing firm. Jackson Reynolds' story teaches us that dignified resistance can be more powerful than reactive anger. By documenting everything and strategically addressing discrimination, he created systemic change rather than just personal vindication. The incident demonstrates how power dynamics shift when we refuse to accept injustice while maintaining professionalism. True leadership means standing firm on principles even when it's uncomfortable. Jackson could have accepted compensation and moved on, but he recognized his unique position to drive meaningful change that would benefit countless others facing similar discrimination. The story also highlights how discrimination carries real business consequences in today's connected world. Companies that tolerate bias don't just harm individuals, they damage their reputation, stock value, and customer relationships. Perhaps most importantly, we see that transformative change often begins with a single person refusing to accept the status quo. Jackson's mother was right, sometimes the highest form of success isn't just achieving personal goals, but widening the path for those who follow. What would you do if you faced discrimination like Jackson? Would you speak up and demand systemic change, or would you handle it differently? Comment below with your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to support more content that exposes racism and explores important social issues. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up for what's right can create ripples of change far beyond what we imagine. Thank you for watching, and remember, your voice matters in creating a more equitable world where everyone is treated with dignity regardless of their appearance. #Lessons learned. Jackson Reynolds' story teaches us that dignified resistance can be more powerful than reactive anger. By documenting everything and strategically addressing discrimination, he created systemic change rather than just personal vindication. The incident demonstrates how power dynamics shift when we refuse to accept injustice while maintaining professionalism. True leadership means standing firm on principles even when it's uncomfortable. Jackson could have accepted compensation and moved on, but he recognized his unique position to drive meaningful change that would benefit countless others facing similar discrimination. The story also highlights how discrimination carries real business consequences in today's connected world. Companies that tolerate bias don't just harm individuals, they damage their reputation, stock value, and customer relationships. Perhaps most importantly, we see that transformative change often begins with a single person refusing to accept the status quo. Jackson's mother was right, sometimes the highest form of success isn't just achieving personal goals, but widening the path for those who follow. What would you do if you faced discrimination like Jackson? Would you speak up and demand systemic change, or would you handle it differently? Comment below with your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to support more content that exposes racism and explores important social issues. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up for what's right can create ripples of change far beyond what we imagine. Thank you for watching, and remember, your voice matters in creating a more equitable world where everyone is treated with dignity regardless of their appearance.